organization with different branches, one would expect the rules and regulations being followed to be the same across the whole board. People will find this very difficult to believe, but rules vary from prison to prison, prison warden to prison warden, and even the same officer, depending on how the officer is feeling on a certain day, may make different decisions in the same incident, in the same scenario. Imagine if they've had a fight with their spouse and they bring their baggage into the prison, which isn't supposed to happen. I can talk about this for hours and hours, but I can't make a perpetual video. So I'm going to discuss incidences that I feel are important to be highlighted, that either I have suffered or people have suffered that I have seen with my own eyes. First of all, let's talk about committee made and committee media. When an inmate is transferred from one prison to another, they will obviously carry all their possessions with them, like uniforms, toiletries, buckets, etc. When I was transferred from committee made to committee media in 2019, I carried all my belongings with me, which included a bucket that I used to store my books and used to double up as a bathing bucket. There are no showers, hot or cold, in Kenyan prisons. It's the bucket brigade. Upon entry into committee medium security, the duty officer confiscated my bucket, saying that buckets from other prisons were not allowed in there. It had my name written on it, and it was impossible to erase. I had to give it up, but a couple of days later, I saw it in the possession of another inmate. I asked him where he got it from, and I was told the duty officer who had confiscated it from me had sold it to him for 500 shillings. This is an inspector of prisons, the equivalent of a deputy OCS in the police, corrupting the system for 500 shillings with a criminal. It was true that buckets weren't allowed into committee medium from other prisons, but once confiscated, it shouldn't be sold. When I was transferred from committee main to Nevasha main prison in 2013, they had a crazy rule. All inmates being admitted were required to defecate on a sheet of newspaper to ensure that they hadn't hidden any contraband in their rectum. The main objective of this was to catch phones being smuggled into the prison, even though they had metal detectors which could detect phones inserted in rectums, in prisoners' rectums. Once the inmate had emptied their bowels, a trustee and a prison officer would sift through the feces with a stick to confirm there was no contraband. How? Back to committee media. Inmates eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner in an open field. The craziest rule was that prisoners have to eat with their hands. No spoons are allowed, irrespective whether the spoon is made out of metal, plastic, or wood, since according to the authorities, they can be turned into a lethal weapon. Metal, I agree, but a weapon made out of plastic or wood? The rule about metal spoons is supposed to be implemented in all prisons, but in most, authorities turn a blind eye since they realize how unhygienic it can be eating with one's hands, especially when there's a water shortage. There was an officer, Major Karanja, who was so strict about implementing this that if an inmate were to be found in possession of a spoon, they would certainly receive a good, thorough beating. And if Karanja were in a bad mood, or the inmate were to argue against the confiscation or thrashing, they would be charged with a prison offense, sent to solitary confinement for between 3 to 7 days, and lose the same number of days of their statutory remission. At the same time, committee medium security prison, there is a canteen where an inmate can buy toiletries, bread, milk, etc. using hard cash, which in all other prisons is forbidden since inmates are not supposed to possess any material things like cash. Despite this being an open secret, if any inmate were to be found in possession of cash by one of the security officers, then it would be confiscated and the officer would pocket the money. And once again, if the prisoner were to argue against this, they would be charged with the prison offense, sent to solitary confinement for between 3 to 7 days, and there goes 3 to 7 days of statutory remission. Doesn't matter on the amount. 100 bob, 1,000, 10,000, punishment's the same. Inmates that are remandees are allowed to be visited as many times that can be reasonably facilitated by the authorities, while inmates that are being convicted may be visited once a month. Unfortunately, this is all at the discretion of the officer in charge of the prison. These visits are normally through two thick glass window panes with a gap this big, like a foot or a foot and a half between, wire mesh at the top and the bottom, so one has to shout in order to be heard. That's the same in all prisons. Parliament passed a law called remote parenting for inmates, where inmates with children may come to the prison with their guardian to visit the inmate. Persons under the age of 18 were not allowed into prison prior to this. Under this law, the visitors can bring along home-cooked food and they can eat together like a picnic, etc. Though the law says that the visitors can bring home-cooked food, in some prisons, citing security reasons, the authorities would put restrictions on the type of food allowed into the prison from outside, and then sell foodstuffs to the visitors at exorbitant prices, like a 500 ml plastic bottle of soda, 100 bob, banana, 20 bob, bread, 100 shillings, and the craziest, a meal consisting of 2 chapatis, rice, meat stew, potatoes for 1,000 shillings. For a family of 4, that would cost 4,000 shillings. How many people in Kenya can afford that for a single meal? I understand this trend started in Naivasha main prison and then found its way to other prisons. Anyway, the final situation I like to discuss is the availability of toiletries. Cleanliness is close to godliness. Treasury allocates funds for inmates' hygiene like soap, toothpaste. In some prisons like Naivasha, toiletries are bought from that fund and given to the inmates. While at both committee main and medium, I was imprisoned at, the welfare officer and the officer in charge would pocket the funds. I once raised the matter with the head of the welfare office at committee meeting during COVID, when no visitors were allowed and I had nothing. Her name was Inspector Eunice Kurecho. She tried to intimidate me with threats, but when she realized that I wasn't going to back down, she had me put in solitary confinement for a day without being charged. She simply said I was being rude, which I was. I'm a human being with a breaking limit. Looking at her body language now, I think there was something else behind the story and she'd been caught. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you have enjoyed this video and learned something new. Kindly subscribe, like, and share. If you have any questions, do ask. Thank you.